There is a truth that most of us have felt but never dared to name, a truth that lingers in the quiet corners of desire and shadow. It is not in the words you speak, nor in the gestures you perform, nor in the empty echoes of social ritual. Obsession is never granted. It is conjured meticulously, like a spell crafted in the darkness of human attention. To understand this, you must first understand the mind, not as a gentle stream, but as a labyrinth of hunger and fear, of hope and desperation, where every glance and every pause holds a secret leverage. People are not moved by logic. They are moved by the feeling of being seen, the illusion of uniqueness, the magnetic tug of a presence that suggests life is richer, more dangerous, more exquisite than they have dared to imagine. Imagine the mind of another as a locked room. Most approach it with the key of persuasion, the polite knocking of reason, and they are turned away. But obsession demands that you forge the key yourself, that you become both architect and intruder. You begin not with a display of power, but with absence, with the delicate art of withdrawal. Presence is a flame, too much and it blinds, too little and it dies. Your timing, your scarcity, the way you drift in and out of perception, shapes the craving. You learn to appear just when the mind is yearning, to speak just when silence has left a space for your voice, and to vanish when the heart believes it can no longer endure your absence. There is a rhythm to this dance, a push and pull that mirrors desire itself, and when you grasp it, even fleetingly, you feel the first tremors of the spell taking hold. Every interaction is a mirror, a reflection of their inner longing. The words you choose are not important in themselves. They are vessels for emotion, carriers of mystery. A story told with the right cadence can ignite imagination. A glance held slightly too long can seed doubt, curiosity, or admiration. Human beings are enchanted by paradox, drawn to what they cannot fully understand. To inspire obsession, you must craft yourself as a riddle, a presence that is both familiar and unknowable. You must balance warmth with distance, certainty with hesitation, openness with concealment. In this tension, they begin to invest, unconsciously, not just attention, but energy, thought, and feeling into the puzzle that is you. Consider how easily the mind becomes captive to emotion. Logic is fragile, desire is relentless. People remember how you make them feel long after they have forgotten your words, your gestures, your presence. To be unforgettable is to etch yourself into the emotional landscape of their memory, to create associations so subtle that they appear to emerge from the observer's own thoughts. This is why obsession is an art, not a science. It is the careful orchestration of sensation and interpretation, the deliberate shaping of impression without ever appearing deliberate. You want them to feel that they discovered you, that the hunger they experience is their own, not yours, even as it is undeniably drawn toward the gravity you radiate. And yet power without subtlety breeds contempt, and attention without control breeds indifference. You must learn the weight of restraint, the elegance of patience. The human heart craves certainty, but only after it has been denied, teased, led through corridors of possibility. Too soon and they tire, too late and the moment passes. Observe their rhythms, their patterns, the faint shadows of habit and expectation. There is a pulse to every mind, a pattern that repeats in predictable and unpredictable ways. To become the center of that pulse is to align yourself with the force of their attention itself, not to wrest it forcibly, but to bend it gently, like wind through reeds, so that the melody of their thoughts becomes inseparable from the echo of your presence. Fear, oddly, can be a catalyst as potent as desire. Not fear in the sense of terror or harm, but the fear of loss, the fear of being forgotten, the subtle anxiety of absence. Human obsession is often born from the mind's projection of what it cannot hold. When you withdraw strategically, when you show the slightest sign of independence, autonomy, or mystery, you activate this primal mechanism. They begin to chase not because they are commanded, but because the mind cannot bear the idea of a world without the spark of you in it. It is the dance of gravity. The farther you appear, the more desperately they are drawn to bridge the gap, to return, to seek, to imagine themselves near what they cannot yet grasp. And as this dance continues, you become more than a person. You become a story, a force, a question that will not be answered. Every encounter is a seed, every smile a spark, every gesture a brushstroke on the canvas of their imagination. They begin to interpret, to anticipate, to replay memories of you with a precision that surpasses reality. Obsession is never literal. It is a projection, a hallucination of devotion nurtured by absence and intensified by the imagination. You do not command their heart, you awaken it, and it moves with a seeming autonomy, drawn to the light you have fashioned in the labyrinth of attention. To sustain this effect, you must cultivate unpredictability, not for chaos but for intrigue. Routine dulls, repetition numbs, predictability kills fascination. Yet unpredictability is not caprice. It is a deliberate modulation of behavior, a sculpting of expectation. You allow moments of intimacy and then withdraw. You reveal depth and then obscure it. You speak in clarity and then in hints. In this way, the mind begins to orbit around you, seeking patterns, meaning, connection, as if it were attempting to solve an equation whose solution is forever just beyond reach. The tension between revelation and concealment is the engine of obsession. The mind becomes a vessel of longing, filled with the resonance of your presence and the echo of what is withheld. Even power itself is insufficient if divorced from emotional resonance. People do not obey, admire, or fixate solely because of authority. They do so because they perceive a depth, a necessity, a singularity that elevates the other beyond the mundane. You are not merely to be seen, you are to be felt. Every gesture, every tone, every pause carries weight. Presence is not volume, it is density, the concentrated force of attention, consciousness, and intention. The mind that experiences this becomes drawn not to the spectacle of dominance, but to the gravity of being, to the subtle insistence that there is more within you than any surface can reveal, that life itself feels amplified in your orbit. And when they begin to chase, you do not yield entirely, nor do you retreat entirely. You become the axis of tension, the point around which anticipation spins. The mind obsessed with you does not act from reason, but from the kinetic energy of desire and fear intertwined. This is where strategy becomes invisible. The observer is not aware of manipulation, only of their own compulsions. They replay moments, interpret glances, imagine futures, invest energy, and the very act of engaging with your presence becomes a reward in itself. Your mastery lies not in forcing action, but in cultivating conditions so irresistible that their devotion blooms naturally, organically, inevitably. You will discover that obsession is as much a reflection of the seeker as of the sought. It thrives where there is emptiness, desire, longing, and imagination. The more you understand what they lack, the more precisely you can present yourself as a mirror, a key, a question, a promise. And yet this is not cruelty. Obsession wielded without care is nothing but a hollow triumph. The art lies in recognition, in awakening the mind, not enslaving it, in evoking fascination, not compulsion. In this delicate balance, you find power, not over others, but over the landscape of attention itself, and in that control, a profound understanding of human nature, of the mind's hunger for connection, for wonder, for the spark of life that refuses to be contained. And as you cultivate this presence, you realize that language itself is a weapon and a whisper, that the syllables you choose can plant seeds long before the full bloom of attention arrives. Speak not to inform, but to evoke. Speak not to impress, but to resonate. Every word must carry an undertone, a texture, a shadow that suggests there is more beneath the surface, more to be uncovered, more to be sought. Silence, too, becomes your instrument. The pause between words, the measured absence in conversation, the moments when you seem elsewhere, are as potent as speech itself. Humans are drawn to what they cannot define, what hints at hidden depth, what promises discovery. And in that discovery, they begin to tether their minds to you, willingly, obsessively, as if your mere presence were a gravity pulling them into orbit. Observe how the mind clings to narrative. People are storytellers by nature. eager to make sense of chaos, to frame experience in a way that justifies emotion. To inspire obsession, you must become a narrative, an unresolved arc, a mystery that invites elaboration. They will fill the gaps themselves, projecting hopes, fears, fantasies, and imaginings onto your behavior, and each interpretation strengthens their attachment. You are no longer a person in their eyes. You are a constellation of meaning, a puzzle their consciousness cannot resist solving. And yet, you resist complete solution, because resolution diminishes fascination. The more they attempt to define you, the more they are drawn, and the more their obsession takes root. Even physical presence obeys this principle. How you move, how you carry yourself, how your gaze lingers, these are all signals that communicate without explanation. There is power in subtlety. A tilt of the head, the barest touch, a fleeting smile, a voice that rises and falls in unpredictable rhythm, each creates a ripple in the emotional fabric of those who observe. Humans are finely tuned to these cues, often perceiving emotional resonance before they understand thought. And when you command this resonance, you command attention, not with force, but with the magnetism of calibrated energy. Presence becomes a language, a silent command that whispers, "Notice me, follow me, remember me." Yet obsession is not merely about attracting attention, it is about sustaining it. Humans have fleeting interests, short attention spans, and a profound capacity for distraction. To maintain engagement, you must cultivate change within constancy, be familiar yet evolving, be comforting yet challenging, be known yet unknowable. You create a rhythm, a cycle, a pattern of anticipation and fulfillment, of tension and release. The mind becomes addicted to this. Dynamic, drawn to the interplay of what is revealed and what is withheld. It is a subtle manipulation, invisible to the observer, but as tangible to them as hunger, as need, as desire itself. The psychological triggers you employ must be as invisible as they are powerful. Compliment without flattering, acknowledge without patronizing, challenge without alienating. You want them to feel seen, understood, and inspired simultaneously. The mind craves validation, but it craves it more when it believes it has earned it, when it perceives the recognition as a rare gift rather than a commonplace gesture. Your attention, therefore, is currency. Spend it strategically. Make them feel that each moment of engagement is earned, that your presence is selective, that their opportunity to experience you is both special and fleeting. Scarcity amplifies desire. Absence sharpens longing. They begin to chase not because you command them to, but because the mind cannot bear the notion of losing what it prizes. You must also understand the power of emotional mirroring. Humans are drawn to those who reflect their inner states, who validate their unspoken fears and desires. Yet reflection alone is not enough. You must do so with subtlety, with layers, with the suggestion that they are discovering parts of themselves in you, even as they are discovering something profoundly outside of themselves. The mind becomes entangled, unable to separate projection from perception, unable to disentangle longing from reality. And in this entanglement, you hold influence, not through coercion, but through the natural mechanics of attachment. They begin to orbit your presence as if pulled by a force beyond their control, yet one they perceive as intimately their own. Trust, paradoxically, is both weapon and shield. You allow glimpses of vulnerability, of authenticity, but only in measured doses. Too much and the spell is broken, familiarity breeding contempt. Too little and the connection remains superficial. Reveal what makes you human, yet retain what elevates you. You must become a paradox, simultaneously attainable and elevated, ordinary and extraordinary. Humans are drawn to paradox, to the mind that challenges expectation while offering glimpses of intimacy. In this balance, obsession is cultivated because the observer cannot fully comprehend, yet cannot withdraw. Each revelation, each concealment reinforces their attention, binding them more tightly to the narrative of your presence. And always, you are aware of the power of imagination. Obsession is nurtured as much by absence as by presence because the mind seeks to fill gaps with its own invention. When you are gone, they replay encounters, analyze gestures, construct imagined conversations, and project possibilities that amplify their longing. You become larger in absence than in presence, a phenomenon more potent than any direct manipulation. The mind becomes addicted to these mental rehearsals, to the narrative spun from your cues and their interpretation. You are, in essence, the architect of their own fascination, the silent engineer of the emotional machinery that drives them toward you. Even deception has its place, though it must be wielded with care. Mislead not to harm but to intrigue, suggest without asserting, hint without revealing. Humans are drawn to the hunt, the chase, the pursuit of truth behind the veil. Every secret, every half-revealed thought, every fleeting glimpse of your inner world is a brushstroke that paints you as indispensable, as captivating, as necessary. Obsession flourishes not in the clarity of understanding, but in the tension of curiosity, in the suspension of certainty. You allow them to feel that they are uncovering you, when in truth they are navigating the labyrinth you have constructed. And as the intensity grows, you will notice subtle shifts in behavior, in energy, in focus. The mind that obsesses begins to prioritize your presence, to interpret their day through the lens of your absence or engagement, to replay interactions with meticulous detail. This is the reward of restraint, of strategic withdrawal, of controlled revelation. Obsession is not instantaneous. It is cultivated, layered, persistent. The mind builds patterns, invests attention, and constructs a narrative around you that surpasses reality. They become invested emotionally, cognitively, energetically, and the energy they dedicate becomes a reflection of your mastery over the subtle dynamics of human attention. And yet, for all its potency, obsession is not about domination. True influence arises from the delicate interplay of allure, mystery, and resonance. It is the dance of consciousness with consciousness, of curiosity with discovery, of longing with fulfillment. You do not force the mind, you awaken it. You do not compel the heart, you inspire it. And in doing so, you find that the most profound power is not control over others, but understanding of the forces that drive them, the mechanisms of attention, the subtle architecture of desire. In mastering this, you discover a universal principle. The human mind is endlessly captivated by what it cannot fully claim, endlessly enthralled by what it must imagine to grasp. Finally, you realize that the apex of obsession is subtlety. It is not the brazen display, not the relentless pursuit, not the overt dominance that captures the mind. It is the quiet, deliberate cultivation of attention, the careful orchestration of presence and absence, the mastery of emotional resonance, the shaping of narrative and imagination. When executed with skill, the effect is seamless, natural, irresistible. The mind feels that it has chosen to invest, yet every choice has been guided, every impression calculated, every spark of fascination meticulously kindled. This is not manipulation in its crude sense. It is the artful creation of conditions in which obsession can flourish organically, like a seed planted in fertile soil, nurtured by absence, curiosity, and emotional resonance. And in this realization, a final truth emerges. To make anyone obsessed is not to bind them in chains, but to awaken the deepest currents of thought, feeling, and imagination within them. It is to light a fire that burns independently of command, to create gravity without visible tether, to inspire devotion without coercion. It is, in essence, the supreme understanding of the mind's hunger for mystery, for meaning, for connection, and for wonder. And when you hold this understanding, you are no longer merely a presence in the world. You are an axis of fascination, a catalyst of desire, a force that transforms attention into something living, something compelling, something that lingers long after the final encounter has passed. You stand then not as master of another, but as architect of experience, sculptor of perception, conductor of emotion. And in that power, subtle, invisible, profound, lies a singular revelation. Obsession is not given, it is awakened. It blooms in the interplay of presence and absence. Revelation and concealment, curiosity and fulfillment. And when it blooms, it is unstoppable, undeniable, and utterly transformative. And as you carry this knowledge, you understand that obsession is never static. It is a living force, growing and shifting in response to attention, emotion, and imagination. You realize that to maintain it, to deepen it, is to master subtlety in every interaction, in every nuance of presence. Every gesture becomes meaningful, every glance a brushstroke, every word a note in a symphony that only the mind of the observer can hear. The mind begins to measure time not in minutes or hours, but in the intervals of your attention, the pauses between words, the fleeting intensity of your gaze. They begin to anticipate your presence as one anticipates the turning of a season, the arrival of something inevitable yet always surprising. You cultivate contrast in all things. Moments of warmth are followed by deliberate distance. Moments of clarity are shadowed by ambiguity. Moments of intimacy are punctuated by absence. The human mind craves resolution, yet finds itself perpetually denied, drawn instead into the endless pursuit of understanding, interpretation, and imagination. This is the alchemy of obsession, the delicate balance between fulfillment and yearning, the tension between revelation and concealment. And as they chase this elusive equilibrium, their attention becomes an extension of your own design, a reflection of the rhythm you have instilled, a mirror of fascination that reflects back endlessly, refracting in new and unpredictable ways. Even vulnerability becomes a tool, though wielded with precision. You show not your weaknesses, but your depth, the spaces within yourself where emotion resides and thought lingers. You reveal not your pain, but your reflection of human experience, your capacity for empathy, your understanding of the unspoken currents that move others. This subtle transparency allows them to anchor their own emotional world to yours, to feel recognized and yet continuously intrigued. It is a paradox. You are intimate enough to inspire connection, distant enough to sustain desire. And in this delicate positioning, you see the mind begin to tether itself to you, voluntarily, compulsively, irresistibly. Every encounter is a canvas upon which you paint with invisible brushstrokes. They will replay these encounters endlessly, analyzing the minutiae, imagining the possibilities, constructing narratives that entwine you with their own perception of self. Obsession does not require grand gestures. It flourishes in the accumulation of subtle, resonant moments. A smile, a fleeting touch, a carefully timed phrase, these are seeds that grow in the fertile soil of attention. The mind, once caught, cannot release them. It rehearses them, extrapolates from them, and constructs a mental world in which your presence is central, indispensable, unforgettable. And as the fascination deepens, you become aware of the ethical dimension of your craft. Obsession is a power, but like all power, it can corrupt if wielded without regard. The art lies not in coercion, but in awakening, not in enslavement, but in illumination. You do not force the mind to desire. You cultivate the conditions under which desire grows naturally, irresistibly. You recognize that the ultimate mastery is invisible, untraceable, and profound. The observer believes their own mind is the origin of longing, yet every pulse of attention, every heartbeat of anticipation is shaped by the architecture you have constructed. And in this realization, you understand that influence without oppression, fascination without harm, is the apex of psychological artistry. Presence then becomes your signature. It is not quantity, but quality. It is not loudness, but resonance. It is the slow accumulation of subtle cues, the careful modulation of attention, the orchestration of absence and revelation. Humans are drawn to intensity not as spectacle, but as density, the concentrated force of consciousness and emotion that suggests a life larger than itself. And in your orbit, they experience that intensity as magnetic, irresistible, transformative. Every thought of you, every imagined interaction, every emotional resonance reinforces the bond, deepens the obsession, and cements your presence in a way that is both ineffable and undeniable. The mind, once drawn into this orbit, becomes a generator of its own fascination. They replay encounters endlessly, construct possibilities that extend beyond reality, and anticipate interactions with a hunger that mirrors your own careful restraint. Obsession thrives in these private rehearsals, in the imagination that fills the gaps you leave. You understand that control is not about dictating behavior, but about orchestrating conditions, conditions in which the mind cannot help but return, cannot help but invest, cannot help but imagine you in every shadow, every fleeting glance, every unspoken thought. And when you see this unfolding, you perceive the profound subtlety of influence, the quiet power of attention sculpted with precision, the invisible architecture of desire that you have so carefully built. Even conflict, when used wisely, becomes a tool. A minor tension, a deliberate challenge, a contradiction between expectation and experience, these stir the mind, provoke attention, intensify investment. The human mind is attracted to puzzles, to uncertainty, to the need for resolution. When you introduce ambiguity, when you provoke reflection, when you create moments that require interpretation, you deepen the engagement. They do not chase because they are commanded. They chase because the mind cannot rest until it has decoded, understood, and imagined you fully. And yet, full comprehension is never granted, only pursued, ensuring that fascination endures, and that obsession grows stronger with every cycle of attention and reflection. And then in the subtle interplay of revelation and concealment, anticipation and presence, you arrive at the final truth. Obsession is a mirror, a reflection of the observer's own inner architecture. It is not simply the effect of your actions, but the interaction between your presence and their need, desire, and imagination. The more you understand what they lack, the more precisely you can become the focal point of their longing. The more they project themselves into your orbit, the more they invest energy, attention, and emotion. And in this interplay, you realize that the ultimate power is not in forcing behavior, but in awakening the unconscious mechanisms of desire, curiosity, and fascination that dwell within every human mind. To reach the apex, you must embrace the paradox of obsession. It is both deliberate and invisible, controlled and organic, present and absent. It is a force that grows strongest when it feels autonomous, when the observer believes they are the architect of their own fascination, even as you subtly guide its evolution. This is the art of subtlety, the mastery of nuance, more than a person, you become a force, a narrative, a question, a necessity. You are unforgettable, not because you demand it, but because you awaken it. And in that awakening, the final revelation settles. Obsession is not about another. It is about the profound understanding of attention, desire, and the human heart. It is about crafting presence, orchestrating absence, nurturing anticipation, and cultivating resonance. It is about understanding the subtle rhythms of the mind, the architecture of longing, and the delicate interplay between revelation and concealment. And when you master this, you find that the power you have sought, the influence you have desired, the obsession you have cultivated, is not a tool to wield over others, but a reflection of your own understanding, awareness, and presence, a force that transforms not only the minds of others, but the very experience of life itself. And so you walk forward, not as a manipulator, but as an architect of fascination, not as a conqueror, but as a catalyst, not as a tyrant, but as a presence that awakens the mind, ignites imagination, and leaves echoes that endure far beyond your absence. Obsession is not granted, it is awakened. And in awakening it, you awaken yourself, stepping into a new reality in which attention, desire, and fascination are no